Okay, so we'll look at question 3. A single observation x is to be taken from the binomial distribution with n value of 12. This observation is used to test the null hypothesis that p equals 0.5 against the alternate hypothesis that p is greater than 0.45. Using a 5% level of significance, find the critical region for this test. Okay, so let's get into it. For H0, we're already given this, but let's still lay it out in a familiar format. H1 is that p is greater than 0.45. If the null hypothesis is true, that means we're assuming that the binomial has an n value of 12 and a p value of 0.45. The expectation from there is 12 multiplied by 0.45 equals 5.4, and the significance level 0.05. Okay, so we're asked to find a critical region for this test. Let's even quickly get one of these diagrams. The expectations around the middle, 5.4. We're looking to see whether or not this has increased enough for us to reject the null hypothesis. So it would have increased so that it is inside of this area, 0.05. Okay, so that's 5%, and we're checking to see whether or not, we're checking to see which value we can state and say if it's bigger than this particular value, if it is this value or bigger, then we will reject H0. We're trying to find a value that represents that. So we're trying to find the first out of each of these values. Okay, we know 5.4 is over here. How far away do we need to go for us to be confident, for us to have enough evidence to reject H0? All right, so looking this up in the tables, I'm going to try and narrow down some values that I think this will be suitable for. So going to the section where n equals 12, p equals 0.45, looking down that column, and I'm going to check around about 7 or 8. Those seem to be probabilities that will have 5% above them. So I'll check the probability. So I'm looking for a value that satisfies this statement. The probability that x is greater than or equal to this unknown value is going to be less than 0.05. As soon as I've met that condition, that's the value that I'm looking for. Okay, so the probability that x is greater than or equal to 7, well, that equals 1 minus the probability x is less than or equal to 6. In this case, 1 minus 0.7393, 0.2707. Okay, that is not smaller than 5%, it's not smaller than 0.05. So I'll try another value. X is greater than or equal to 8. 1 minus the probability that x is less than or equal to 7. 0.8883. 0.1117. Okay, still not significantly small. We'll try greater than or equal to 9. One minus 0.9644, which equals 0.0356. Okay, and finally that one is smaller. So that's the first value that was smaller than 5%, exactly what I was looking for. So this one wasn't good enough, this one wasn't good enough. This is the percentage that I want. That in itself is not the critical region. The critical region is this set of values. For this particular hypothesis test, if the observed value is 9 or above, we will end up rejecting H0. So that's what the critical region is all about, and that's what we were asked to find. This value is going to be 9, 10, etc. Okay, the value before the critical region would have been 8. Okay, so just to be explicit about the critical region, there it is. Okay, the next one's a 1 marker, is usually a follow-on question. What's the actual significance level of the test? We were aiming for a 5% significance level, but it's never actually exactly 5. That was just our guideline. This probability, the probability associated with the critical region, is going to be the significance level of the test. So 0.0356, which we can write as 3.56%. Okay, so moving on, the value of the observation is found to be 9. State the conclusion that could be made based on this observation. Okay, so as I said before, any observed value that is going to be 9 or greater is going to make us reject the null hypothesis. That's what the critical region was all about, the values that will make us reject the null hypothesis. State the conclusion that can be made based on this observation. Well, the conclusion is we will reject the null hypothesis. Okay, this question didn't have any context, so just enough evidence to reject the null hypothesis. I can just talk about the p-value, so there's evidence to support that the p-value is greater than 0.45. Okay, so next we're asked to state whether or not this conclusion would change if the same test was carried out at the 10% level of significance and at the 1% level of significance. Well, basically we're checking to see whether or not our critical region would change and how it would change. So at the 10% level of significance, if we go back to these values, x is greater than or equal to 9 would still be the first region that would be greater than 10%. So the conclusion would be the same for 10%. But at the 1% significance level, x is greater than or equal to 9 would not actually be the critical region. This value here would not be the first one smaller than 1%. So x is greater than or equal to 9 will not be the critical region. 9 will not be a significant observation, and we wouldn't have enough evidence to reject H0. So for the 1%, the conclusion would change. Okay, so just be careful with the end question here, being sure to say whether or not it changes. Part C as well, just making sure that you're giving the final conclusion. This question was a hypothesis test, as we're used to seeing hypothesis tests, but it was broken up in different ways to see that you specifically understand each of the steps of constructing your hypothesis test. So just be careful in reading and responding to make sure that you get all of your marks.